Remember that we all are brothers. Remember that we all are brothers. All people, and beasts and trees, and stone and wind, we all descend from the one great being. That was always there. Before people lived and named it. Before the first seeds sprouted.
I just want to be talking and you'll be like, wait, are we recording? And I'll be like, yeah. Wait, you just told me some shit you didn't want to tell me. I'll be like, well, it's on the public record now. Hi, Stacy.
Getting comfortable with that.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi, Scott.
Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You look good.
Thanks. I'm glad that spring's arrived. I get to take lots of hikes. Makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. Nature's a big thing for you.
Well, it is. It does so much.
Yeah.
So helpful.
So I wanted to bring you on here to talk about some things that are relevant to me, and I'm assuming if it's relevant to me. The reason I'm doing this podcast is because I want to hear a podcast. I wanted to make a podcast that I would want to hear.
Right.
That's the only reason. And I want to hear about things that are interesting to me.
Yeah.
And you're interesting to me.
Aw.
Who you are is interesting to me. What you do is interesting to me. How you do it is interesting to me. So I met you through a group of friends, and then we ended up at a plant medicine ceremony to get a number of them, and we've become very, very close.
Yeah.
And you actually are the me for me. You are my container while I am others' containers. And in my self, whatever the word is, that's an honor to be that for me. I don't know the word, but there's not very many people that I trust with me in that way. Because it's a vulnerable space, and I find myself broken in a lot of ways, and I find myself other in a lot of ways, and I've lived a life full of intense amount of physical and emotional pain, and I'm very open about that pain. But there are some nooks and some crannies that are really only for Stacy. And I value that. Before I met you, I had no idea that my body was holding all my shit. I just thought, if you're having a hard time, you go see a shrink, and they tell you that you're fucked up, and they tell you, it's about your mother or your father, or and I don't mean to be flippant about it, because these are real things. It's about how you were raised and all, and why are you doing this? Where is this coming from? Et cetera, et cetera. And then I met you, and you're like, well, there's a whole other way to attack this. And we started a process, and things began to unravel. And so I want to talk about what it is you do that's different than somebody who talks. Like, I mostly talk. I do some of what you do, but I mostly talk. So let's start there.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's an honor to hold you. And it's a really incredible feeling, the trust you bring. Yeah, and it makes it possible. And your willingness to be curious about new ways is wonderful.
I mean, look, I'm nothing if not curious. Like,
You're definitely
basically my whole existence is based on curious. I don't really think I know anything. I kind of think I've always kind of walked around thinking I'm dumb, but I'm very curious and I'm interested in learning what I'm interested in learning. If it's not something that's interesting to me, it's definitely like there's a very real like this is a yes and this is a no.
right.
This one's a yes.
I'm so glad. It's been fun watching you transform.
Thank you.
So yeah, I've been a healing artist for almost 25 years now. And so my body of work is a synthesis of really the things that I studied to find my own healing, because I found myself deeply suicidally depressed at a very young age, and was actually diagnosed with bipolar at that point, and had an intuitive message to not take the medicine. I was living in Illinois. I was called to move to California and to cleanse, which I didn't even know what that was, but that was the intuition I got. So I did all those things and really made my whole life about turning in and finding what was happening in me and transforming it. And that the desire for that and the commitment for that brought me into many different modalities that from now I can look back and see it was like this trail that they all connected in this beautiful way. But that time I didn't know. But it started with holistic nutrition and then body work in like a somatic and Reikian way. Chinese medicine, shiatsu, acupuncture, and then moved into depth psychology. And at that point, I had found a great amount of healing, and a lot of it had a good context in psychology. And what I found for myself was I had gotten to the point where I could change patterns. I had changed a lot. I had really moved out of depression and into a good quality of life. But I felt like I had front row seats to watching these same emotional patterns happening again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that I found what is called somatics. I really found it. That was the way that I worked. I just always worked somatically. But it was at that point that somatics were really coming into the field of healing as something that some people were starting to dip into. And
so I'm going to interrupt you because I want to translate this to people that don't know. You're incredibly smart, and your vocabulary is somewhere that most of us can't ever meet or reach.
Yeah.
Define somatics.
So somatic means of the body as opposed to the mind.
Thank you.
And so, psychology is the study of, what's interesting is psyche in Latin actually means soul. So it's actually the study of the soul, but who knew that?
That's funny.
And somatic psychology is this wonderful synthesis of a mental understanding, but where we use the faculty of our mind to turn towards our body. And what somatic psychology and actually shamanism has been speaking about for centuries is how we store in our body everything that we experience. And you can think of it a lot like a tree, where a tree has those rings, and we know in those rings it contains everything that tree did. And we have that pattern in our tissue. And so what our mind is actually in reaction to is a neurochemical cascade that's happening, and that's being initiated by the body and by the history that we've lived. And where it's maladaptive is when we have feelings that happened the first place that we pressed down, that we didn't feel fully through.
Mm.
And then those pattern as dissociation and closure in the body. And so when we have circumstances happen and it touches and awakens an old feeling, if we have a habit and pattern of closing down to that feeling again, we just go back into a repetitive story in the mind. And that's when our life gets built from our mind, and it gets built from story, and it gets built from a chronic reaction to the thing that happened the first time. And we're like a puppet and a robot doing the same thing again and again and again. Right?
So
life comes from-
basically the same thing just happens in a different Halloween costume over and over and over again, and we just create the same scenario?
Yep. And we're being puppeted by our body until we turn towards it and we feel through the stuff in our body that happened, and we give it accompaniment. We give it safe harbor. What's rad is the body is profoundly alchemical. And so if those things are there trapped and frozen and we just continue to turn away, we are taking our life force and slowly and steadily freezing it. And each and every aspect of it that gets frozen, we then can't consciously use to create our life with. And then people.
So you're saying that there's a way that if we focus enough, let's use the tree, we can go in to the ring of the tree and sort of poke the ring and spread it out. And so it integrates with the rest of the tree, and it's not condensed as a ring on the tree. Is that what I'm picking up?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good way to see it. And where the metaphor falls short is the tree wouldn't need to do that, right? But for us, when they're trapped and frozen and dissociated from, they are patterning as those rings. And so when a like circumstance happens, it touches and awakens the sensation that happened in the first place that we didn't feel, and we will automatically go into closure around that sensation. Unless we've turned towards it, like you said, opened up that ring. And when we open it, there's actually memories in there, and we can feel them fully through. And it's very much like being able to go to your young self and give yourself the company you needed in the first place. So then the pain actually composts, and the energy that was trapped in that ring gets to return into present time. And then you're no longer puppeted by those feelings and by those experiences. And then what you get to do is make conscious choice instead of be puppeted by what happened and didn't go well the first time.
And so when you bring this through, basically you're picking up this piece, you're mixing it, putting it back into living matter. When a scenario comes up that would typically trigger an action or a reaction from that place, what happens instead of?
Well, so if it's pattern and closure, that closure is a defense. So until you've integrated it, you're going to go into automatic defense. And that's when, and we've all had it with ourselves or someone else. We're in a conversation and you say something and they're just like an automatic no. It's like what you're saying isn't going in. And it's like, okay, let's try that again. Right? So you're basically archiving a response from way in the past that has nothing to do with the present moment, actually. So once you've felt through that old feeling, you can actually just be present. And then a person can ask you something and you can be there as an adult and listen and have a current time yes or a no or a response instead of an automatic archived closure.
I see that. What has the journey for you been like, finding all of this? Because this isn't something you learn really in school. This is something this sounds like a mission. This sounds like you're not the person who reads book, you're the person who writes books. And that can be a lonely road. And I wanna understand how that has been for you, because that sounds. I mean, having to do all of that on yourself, not even knowing if it's gonna work,
Yeah.
hoping it's gonna work, or having faith that it's gonna work. Um, that's a real. There's a guinea pig aspect of that where all options are on the table.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a guinea pig approach, and it was deeply lonely. Absolutely. Um, I I'll start with saying one of the things that I'm most passionate about is helping people clear the conditioning and the blocks between them and the energy in their body that I call spirit. And we all have an internal guidance system. We come with that, but trauma and conditioning patterns us into fight or flight. And then we lose a relationship with the language of our spirit, which is sensation. And I start with that because while it was very lonely, this lifetime have been blessed with a constant relay of that conversation with my spirit and my body. I never lost that. Even though I did get very sick and I dealt with staggering depression, I still could hear my intuition guiding me very loudly. I like to say I was able to succeed on one hand because I hated suffering so much. So I was really devoted to turning towards it and changing it. And also I was stupid enough to follow the small, still voice more than I did the loud voices outside of me.
Yeah.
And when you call it guinea pig, it's exactly right, because I did make a conscious choice. I'm being given this diagnosis. I'm being handed these medicines that my body is saying, is saying you will lose yourself even more. And so I followed an intuition, and I followed it again and again and again and again and again, and made the conscious choice to live my life as an experiment. That there was this voice inside. It spoke about alignment. It spoke about a way that through observing the planet, that there was a harmony and there was a heliotropic nature, or that nature knew how to find its way to the sun. And nature and my body said, we are that same thing. We can do that. So just listen, and we'll bring us home. And so that's what I did. And I traversed that. I moved from Illinois and I came to California, and I really just went one step at a time. And I always thought, you can imagine, I'm 45 now. I started turning in at about 17.
Wow.
And I did one doorway at a time, and each one delivered me more and more. So when I started in holistic nutrition, I felt a bit better, but still really, really suffering. And then when I found Chinese medicine and body work, so more transformed, yet still a level of suffering. And both of those I can see now. The way I call it is I've been thawing out. I've been thawing out from the stuff that I unconsciously froze based on early experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been composting my past experiences and being able to bring them into current time. And it just so happened that the modalities I was brought towards were body-based, were somatic in nature, not because my mind was smart enough to go towards those. It's what I was attracted to. It was what my intuition led me to, some sensibility inside. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying. And I think most people can relate to when you're working a process and it's not better. You can think it's not working.
Right, sure.
But I had the support of myself, and also my family was really, really supportive. My friends have been so supportive to help me track the slow incremental healing that was happening. And there was enough experiential tracking of, okay, a little bit better. Okay, a little bit better. Keep going. And so I just kept following that still small voice. And it brought me, eventually into breath work, eventually into, and I will correct one thing you said. I am a person that read a lot of books. I read a lot of books. I no longer read a lot of books, but for a long time, I was reading every book. I was studying it all. And I got 1,000,000 degrees not because I was trying to be a healing artist, but because I was trying to not want to die. I had a beautiful heart and I had an incredible love for humanity. I had an incredible intuitive knowing of the soul and the spirit and what would make it happy, and deep, deep, deep depression. And I really wanted to resurrect my heart and let it live as what it was, and without this shroud of so much pain.
What did the depression feel like?
Well, like I said, that the diagnosis was bipolar, and though I don't relate with being bipolar now, it presented very bipolar. So I would be expansive, happy, connected. I was very talented. I had a lot of gifts that moved through me. So I'd feel a lot like I seem right now. And then I would get slingshot into what felt like my whole body was underneath an extremely heavy weight. So it was like I was being pressed down, but it wasn't just that I was underneath it. That weight was also like a moat inside. Inside of my being felt like gelatinous goo and deeply low, heavy, and sad. And at that time, I also was riddled with eating disorder. And so my thoughts were so boring. They were so boring. All they wanted to do was think about what I would and would not eat. And that was deeply boring. And I couldn't think about more useful things when I was in the state of consciousness that was the depression.
Right.
And then I would beam back up into like radical presence. Mm-hmm. My bipolar wasn't one that, if you study bipolar, there's many different expressions. My manic wasn't particularly manic. It was just deeply creative and tons of energy. I wasn't doing unsafe things. I could still sleep. I was just really, really connected to kind of the spirit world in a way that wasn't very normal in Illinois.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, that sounds really intense. And so when you were battling suicidality, how far do you get? Do you get to planning, or is it just the feeling of, I wish I wasn't here?
Well, I mean, I was acutely suicidal for about 7 years. So all of it, I definitely, in most times I was deeply committed to not killing myself. So I wasn't making a plan, though deeply longing for it. So I remember when I was in undergrad, my undergrad was vocal music and theater, and I was gifted. I'd get cast in things, and I'd work so hard to get cast, and I'd love the process. And then a week before show time, I would get hit with so much shame, terror at being seen, which I didn't understand shame at that point. All I knew is all I wanted to do was die. Mm-hmm. I did not want to kill myself. And so what I would do, my undergrad was this beautiful campus, and then the surrounding city was gang-ridden. And so I would go on long walks at night in the gang-ridden area. So maybe I could be killed.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So you would just put yourself in fucked up places, and it's like leaving the keys of the Ferrari and the Ferrari door unlocked in the middle of wherever.
Yeah, that I was like, well, maybe. maybe that could happen because I wasn't going to take my life. There were a couple, I mean, it's interesting, as you named, we met in plant medicine, and plant medicine has been a profoundly transformative ally for me. But at that time, my depression was such that I couldn't use substances. I wasn't that person that could drink away my pain. If I drank, my witness wouldn't turn off. I would just feel myself get low and also stupid, and I'd just be watching all of it, and it was just nightmarish. And then I'd wake up more suicidal the next day. But I did try mushrooms once in college, and I barely survived.
What do you mean? Sorry.
At some point, me and 10 friends lived in this big house in college, and I lived on the 4th floor, and there was a door to the stairs that went up to my room to the 4th floor where there was a high window. And I locked my friends out, and I said goodbye to everyone. And I actually went upstairs, and I called my parents, and I said my goodbyes, and I was there at the window. And I don't know what turned me around. I don't know what it was. But I did. And that was the closest I got. And, as psilocybin would do, once whatever settled down in me, I was able to come down and had such a healing night with my friends. It was interesting. It was, I didn't actually think of this till just now. There was a turning point in that because I'm bisexual, and I had forgotten that I was bisexual. I was raised in a Catholic community, and it was taught that homosexuality and bisexuality was a sin. And so I had unconsciously really packed that down. And being able to make friends with that in my own psyche has been one of the conditionings I was able to let go of that helped heal the depression. And it was actually that night that I recognized consciously a crush on a girl for the first time after I came down the stairs and unlocked the door and then had a really beautiful night. It's funny. I didn't remember that piece till just now.
Yeah. So plant medicine's played a big part in sort of the comeback of Stacy. Yeah.
It has. I mean, I found somatic work and tantra first. And somatic work took me from front row seats to my own suffering to really transformed into a great amount of health and authenticity. And then I found plant medicine in a safe way that was contained and ceremonial, like we do in our community. And what that helped me do, it's like the somatic work, I could rewrite a number of pages at a time. And with plant medicine, I could go in and absolutely surrender because I trust the medicine and I intrinsically trust the divine. Instead of going through a handful of pages at a time, I'd get through a series of my past in one night. Wow. And it was transformed so fast. Wow. So it did that for me. And then the other thing that plant medicine really did was I find it to be like fuel for essence. And it like went in and gave my essence a great meal to where my desire to be normal or desire to be liked or to not go to prison or break a rule or whatever it is, my essence got so fueled that it just came bursting forth as authenticity. And found out, okay, I'm not going to go to jail for being me, and people like me actually more when I'm authentic. And it made it impossible to not land in a really rapturous authenticity.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, I was living as a completely different person before I started that work, and I it's a funny thing because a lot of people are miserable and they don't know it, or they're miserable and they're happy with being miserable. Like they're actually like getting some kind of status out of being, I'm the most miserable.
Yeah.
And you know,
that on the epitaph.
yeah.
The most hard for them.
Yeah. And and I knew a lot of people that were that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how you doing? And they lead with, you know, oh, well, this and this, and this guy's trying to fuck me over, and this and this and this and this, and oh, Jesus. And you know, looking at it through these lenses, having been doing this for so long, it's sad. It makes me sad, but it also makes me incredibly grateful that I kind of found the little wormhole out.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's a real thing.
It's a real thing, and the grace to wake up to your suffering and to wake up to the notion that it could shift is the grace of a lifetime.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane. So you've been on this path for a really, really long time, and I'm sure you've seen some really wacky shit. And I'm always curious to know, like, because I didn't grow up in the ha-ha woo-woo world. I didn't grow up like in yoga and tantra and Eastern philosophy, albeit maybe the most impactful book I ever read was the Autobiography of a Yogi. But that was after. I want to know some wacky shit. I want to hear about some shit. I want to know.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I do. Give me 1 second. All right, shoot it.
Well, I guess I'll just start by saying, and it's hard to know what to pull out of the wacky bag. So maybe you can help me, direct me to which wacky stuff you want.
Well, I think that there's so you are, part of your gift is that you're able to go all the way with the esoteric, with the metaphors and the archetypes and everything that's happening that people that don't see through your lens see. And also, you're a chick that says "fuck it" a lot. Yeah. And so you have an ability to be both.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that on your journey, you've met some people that are overcome with that element of themselves, where they've become completely disintegrated.
Yeah.
Completely, just completely lost themselves. Yeah. And, you know, as people find spirituality, and spirituality gets a bad rap because of where I'm trying to go. And I'm trying to go there because a lot of people would see you as one of those super, super, super spiritual people, but also they, you know, forget that you're like also normal, and you lead a normal life. You're not disintegrated really at all. And I know you pretty well.
Yeah.
And that's a rare thing. But there's some funny shit that happens when you go all the way. And I want to know about it.
Yeah. Well, and I want to echo some of what you're saying, in that I'm very grateful that I wasn't raised New Age, that I was raised in Illinois, and I was raised super normal, very, very normal.
Right.
And I think it's helpful and makes me grounded and relatable, and that the path I walked into spirituality, where I always had a deep relationship with spirit, but when I found yoga and when I found this kind of integrated path, I already had like Midwestern roots, you know? Okay, gosh. I'm the thing that's coming into my head, and I mean, there's no shortage, so we can go through as many as you want. But I think the first really profound, wacky experience that I had was when I was about 24. So I had come out to LA acting, and my acting career was taking off really fast while my suicidality was getting worse even faster. And so I chose to pull out of all of the auditioning and all of acting and just turn to healing full time. And I don't come from a wealthy family, so that meant waiting tables and just full-time healing. And I was just turning over every single stone. And at that time, I was doing a lot of body work, Chinese medicine, tons and tons of yoga. I found if I did yoga once or 2 times a day, that I could get into presence and I could feel good. And if I didn't do it, I was just the depression. And I went to, at that time, a 10-day yoga retreat in New Mexico. And this was a Kundalini yoga retreat, and yogis from all over the world would fly there for their summer solstice. And so I went there with some of my best friends, and it was like maybe, I think it was like the 3rd day. We had done 1 day of white tantric yoga, which is hours and hours of really deep, intense group yoga. And after that, I went to the mountaintop alone, and I made a prayer. And I said, Spirit, I love my heart. I love my spirit. And whatever I would need to do to live as my heart and transform this depression into service, I'll say yes to. And that was my prayer. And then I heard out loud, you're going to have a child with, I won't say his name. And I heard it out loud, and I like turned around, and
like
I was
Moses.
like Moses. Yeah, you know. And I was like, and the person that was named was my ex-boyfriend at that time. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have a child with him? Oh, okay. And I was like, that's wild. And then I went down the mountain to the camp, and my 2 of my best friends.
Wait, there's a lot of Moses here. You were on a mountain?
I was on a mountain.
Okay, so hold on. Yeah, there's some shit happening here.
It's not small. It's not small. And there's more. So,
okay.
So I go down that mountain to the camp, and I tell my 2 of my best friends, and they're like, so this just happened. And they're all like, really? And I was like, yeah. And then there's like, 7 more days of this yoga retreat where we are doing intense, amazing stuff. So I completely forget. Yeah. By the end of that 10 days, I'm not like, it's not like I'm thinking about that. I've had so many transformational experiences. I leave the mountain.
Were you sober? Was this on medicine or no medicine?
I was not. I didn't. I was 23 or 24 at this time. I didn't start working with plant medicine until I was about 36, 35.
Okay.
Yeah. So no plant medicine, completely sober. It was all yoga, all depth psychology, all breath work, all somatics at this time.
Okay.
So I leave the mountain, and like I said, I wasn't a drinker or anything, but my older sister came in town, and we went to sushi, and we got sake. And I wasn't a drinker. I wasn't good at holding my liquor. And so we had sake. And then my ex-boyfriend at that time calls, and we have a conversation, and we get together and have breakup sex. Now, this is the ex-boyfriend that the mountain talked about, right?
Yeah. And was there a light? Was there a bush and a light?
There was no bush. I'm not going to make jokes about bushes in this moment. I'm not going to. And then, but we were using a condom. I had a habit, and by the way, I as a being, did not have sex with someone until I believed that I could receive the child. And this was the first person that I was like, if we did get pregnant, I believed we could receive the child, because I didn't feel like I would want to have an abortion. That was just a sensibility for me. So first person I'd had sex with, we used a condom. I would tie them at the end and throw them away. And I was 4 days after my period and got pregnant.
Low odds.
Low odds. Low odds. And so when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, well, this is not a good idea. It was like, I have been making progress. I was still suicidal, but not constantly consumed. I was very depressed, however, and was like, Spirit, I remember this. I can't pray that prayer. Anything. And I will, and then have it happen and not do it. While everything in me was like, this is a terrible idea. So I told Spirit, I was like, I will receive the child. However, I recommend a miscarriage. And so, Scott, I tell you, just like when
I recommend a miscarriage.
Yeah, and just like when
you're giving God a recommendation.
Like, I think you should rethink this.
Yeah.
I think you should rethink this. And I would like take lots of hikes, which I always did, but I'd be like, it's a good time to fall, while also I was always speaking loving things to the baby. But that was my truth in it. One more little piece that I think is pretty magical about this story is my baby daddy. We had dated on and off for a couple of years. And in the beginning, we had taken a yoga class. And in the yoga class, the teacher was teaching poetically about this word in Sanskrit that's Shri.
Yeah.
That word means unstoppable life force whose essence is joy. And that's what we talked about in that class.
Yeah.
And she said, and the poetry is like the flowers that grow through the cracks in a sidewalk.
Yeah.
And so when he and I left that class, we weren't talking about getting married or having children or anything, but at the same time, we both said, if we ever have a child, we'll name it Shri.
Right, because there's no way this could happen, but it's going to happen if it happens.
Well, it was just, we were so touched by it, because Shri in Sanskrit is like chi. In Chinese medicine, we know the word chi, life force. It's unstoppable life force. It is the suchness that is life. It's essence itself. Yeah. We were just so moved by the poetry, both of us. And then it turns out we were the flowers, or she was the flower
she was the flower.
The sidewalk.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so the child was a girl, and her name is Shri.
And she's incredible.
She's incredible. And actually, me at that time, one of the challenging things for my healing was that I had so many passions and talents and interests. And it was hard for me to focus on which direction to go. And so it would scatter my attention and make it hard for me to be in the present moment. And I knew once she was born, it was clear my attention was to be on her. And so the deficit in my ability to be present, I made putting my attention on her my one-pointed meditation. Buddhism, she became my flame. And so it was actually by putting my attention on her and letting that burn off everything that was between me and the present moment is what healed my depression. All of these other things helped, but it was true that when I made that prayer and it said, this will do it, it did. It did in so many ways. And she is magnificent and my favorite person.
Yeah, it's interesting how how the medicine came through in that way, because it was was so touch and go for you between you and you. But then when you had her, you also had a new sense of purpose. You had a new sense of bringing, like, you had a gift to give to the world.
I did. And what it did, I mean, honestly, it felt a lot more mundane than all that, though. It was like by hook or by crook, that I had to ground.
Mm-hmm.
Every day I had to make the steady choice.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't go do this fantastical thing or that fantastical thing. I had to every day make the porridge and go to the farmer's market and get enough sleep to wake up and be present for her. So it locked me into mundanity in a beautiful, beautiful way.
Yeah. Yeah, it took away. Well, I've always kind of said that there's something going on in society, especially with men, and whenever anybody says something like what you just said, it clicks me into thinking about this, because we don't have to go kill our food. We don't have to go build the house with our hands. We don't have, like, there's so much of our life is being done for us at this point.
Mm-hmm.
That we have too much space in our brain, to cook up other problems, to cook up other shit, to go down a rabbit hole that leads to anxiety or depression, or and if we don't create physical, actual, real world pen to paper, if we don't create challenge, our mind is going to create metaphoric challenge. And the metaphoric challenge is going to be way more severe than the simple challenge of getting in that sauna, sitting in that cold plunge, getting to that gym, and clearing that wherever your mind, because your mind is way more complex than your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so Erewhon or the grocery stores, they've taken away the problem of collecting our food, right? And in most cases,
they've presented a whole new problem.
And then to a large degree, even prepared food, right? So the problem taken off our plate, right? And our psyche, a lot of chance to create problem. Yeah, and so in the Bhagavad Gita, it talks about that for a householder, the daily toil of tending to your home and your health is the highest spiritual practice.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was given the blessing of, I got to go to the market. And I was a hippie, so I did walk to the market, and I did bring my garment bags, and I collected the stuff, and then I would go home and I'd prepare the food. And the action of that was something that was working out psychological problems.
Right. Well, it's moving you into alignment because you're not playing in a mind game. You're not playing a computer game. You're playing a live game.
Yeah.
It's the difference between playing football and playing a video game of football. It's one is you're the doer. You're in it. You're in the action, and it's not to down talk video games. I don't play them, but I get it. Like, I get the thing. Mm-hmm. But there's something about being very much the experiencer, learning how to be the experiencer, mastering being the experiencer, then mastering being the witness. Which is where a lot of us get stuck. Yes. A lot of us don't have a relationship with our witness, with an objective witness. A lot of us have a relationship with a taskmaster, right, or a slave driver, sure, but not an objective, benevolent witness, which would be really a connection to God, to Source. Yeah. And you work a lot with developing that relationship, and you've worked with me, and it is helpful. I think it takes a lot of pressure off. of being alive when you recognize that it's not just you. Because when somebody says I'm talking to myself, you're implying that there's two people. There's two things there.
Yeah.
And you're forgetting that there's two. And
Yes.
the one on the top is always there, and the one on the bottom is always changing. But the one on the top is that little voice that's been in your body, in your mind since you were born.
Yeah,
Same one.
It's the one that can watch your thoughts and can watch your feelings and sensations.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that can watch your thoughts. There's something outside and beyond your thought.
Has to be.
That's the witness, and that's the very part that then gets to get in relationship with the body. Because the other option is to be collapsed in the feelings and then we think we are the feelings, or to be trapped in the mind and then we think we are the mind. And it's at a cost of a relationship with these two aspects,
Mm-hmm.
which is the witness and the body. And, in like Jungian work, they call that an intermarriage. And I would call that integration. In a lot of places, they'd call that masculine and feminine.
Mm-hmm.
And so much of the disparage we see on the planet and on the macro is that, we get that we talk a lot about in society that we've been in a patriarchy. And the way that manifests on the micro is a person in their head thinking they're their mind and no relationship with their body or their spirit.
Right. Yeah.
Right? A patriarchy. And it's not working. Right? And
it's not working.
So when we recognize we aren't our mind, we aren't the story our mind is telling, when we can rest back in the witness and then turn towards the energy in the body that are the sensations, we can create a harmonious relationship within. And then we're actually able to be a champion for a harmonious relationship outside.
Yeah, I work with a lot of couples around the masculine feminine dynamic, and it is it's incredible how convoluted that conversation's become. How men don't know how to show up in a state of quiet, like what it means to show up in a state of quiet. The thing that brings safety to the whole thing. And women don't and which doesn't allow women to fully express. And women I've seen so much of the nails and the stingers from the feminine being shot into the masculine, and there's like a war going on between two parties that don't survive without each other. And if we could really take a moment and put all the weapons down and just take like a day and just appreciate the fuck out of everything that the masculine does for the feminine and appreciate the fuck out of everything that the feminine does for the masculine, I think the world would be a better place, because it's gotten to a point, and it's showing up on a micro, all the way macro, all the way up. Because, when you think about it, the earth is the masculine container for us. It's here. Well, what are we doing to it? But then the earth is feminine to what's beyond it. And men and women are having a really hard time relating, because there's a fogginess as to how to complement each other. And when we're in spirit, we're complementary, and when we're in animal, we can become adversarial. And I'm feeling that a lot.
Yeah, well, I think, when you say if we could put our weapons down, I think the metaphor is strong in that statement, because the weapon on a personal are the defense mechanisms that we think we are. We identify actually as the defense mechanism, and at large, we're a society that has forgotten about their spirit and has been taught that feelings are bad, to not feel the feelings and to use our mind to navigate life. And that is a crushing of the feminine, and will ensure if every time we close to a feeling, defense mechanism forms. And that is in essence a weapon. It's weaponry. And so then when we bring that into relationship, we have people living in defense mechanisms with automatic nose and walls at each other. It is relational war, but we're locked into it. Been hijacked into that. And so on like what we can do is learn to deconstruct that belief system that says that there's something inferior about the feeling sense, or that there's something bad about irrational, like emotions. And then we can build a relationship in our own body with our masculine and feminine. And I'm sure you see when you work with couples, and I work with a lot of couples, when they have found in each solo body a harmonious relationship with their own feelings, between their witness and their feeling, they're able to hold space, like you said, for one another's.
Yeah.
You know, the men have a hard time finding silence, you said, right? Because whose mind has ever been silent? And if you think you're your mind, and then the men think they're supposed to fix it because they're in the place of the mind that has been taught to go. And then the women are like, fuck right off.
Right.
You don't see me or understand me. But you have to get behind the mind to have some place to hold space for something. You'd have to not think you're the defense mechanism.
And also maybe a playbook, maybe more people giving some honest reflections on what works. I think because men are simple. We're simple animals. We're not complicated. We typically do, when we're in our masculine, we're typically pretty simple. Primary colors, as I like to say. And the feminine is the whole Pantone. And so it doesn't take much to get out of us what I can tell every woman on the planet for the rest of my life. If you told your partner, look into his eyes and tell him you're a good man, your life will be 30% better than it was the day before you started doing that. If you told him that every day. Because if a man is told by his partner that he's good, and he feels good, that he's on the good side, he's going to live into that. Because his job, he believes his wife. He wouldn't marry her if he didn't believe her. And hearing from a man that you're good, because we carry the DNA of all the bad shit we've done, right? Because there's a brutality that comes with being a man.
Well, we've also been at large conditioned by religious culture to believe that we're inherently sinners. And so we're not going to listen to our intuition or that small, still voice because we've been taught we're bad. We're sinful.
Well, and also the man is the predator. The man's got the thing that goes into the woman, which means the man chases the woman. Right?
Right.
So the man's a perpetrator. And there's a that we carry that as it relates to women. We carry there's a burden there.
Yeah.
Which is why the cancel culture is so ridiculous, because we're all fighting that battle from the time we go through puberty, which, by the way, as kids, we didn't ask for. We wanted to play on the fucking yard. We didn't want to get hair all over us and be shot up on steroids but it happened. By the way, no one told us what that was going to be like. We just kind of went there for boys and for girls. Like, there was no one. And not that we would listen, but like, I would like to talk to, if anybody ever listens to this and knows somebody who focuses on puberty, I would love to have a long conversation with somebody about the trauma that comes out of that little wormhole.
Yeah.
Because we don't
when we were growing up prior to,
Yeah.
now there's social media and,
You can't get away with the shit you got away with. Yeah.
but now everybody's talking about everything that they're going through and, doing a TikTok reel about
Right.
and
If
what's going
someone
on.
has the balls to say it, and then everybody can come online and be like, "Oh, thank God you said that." Nobody did that one yet.
For our generation, lots of trauma around that.
I mean, we
But
don't get to hide in a chrysalis. You got to go to church and to school. You don't get to hide out while this change is happening. You get to show it off for everybody to ogle at.
Yep.
It's brutal. It's brutal.
It's different.
It's brutal.
But to your point, I agree. When a man is told he's good, he's going to relax into listening to an information system inside.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of, I've got to deny what this says and rebuild feel every day, which is illness.
Well, it puts away the initial, I got to prove I'm good, to get to the juice, to get to the meat of who you really are. So once it's confirmed I'm good, then I get to relax and be into who I am, and there's nothing to defend. There's nothing to prove. Prove and defend are real similar.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. And, proving in essence is defending that you're not bad.
Right. And there's almost nothing more repellent. And there's almost nothing more repellent than proving energy. When somebody's like proving, dude, it's get me out of here, please. I got somewhere to be. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard for me.
Earlier in life, because I really bit the hook of trying to prove my goodness for a good while.
Listen, we know a lot of people that there's a lot of people that are in that, and I get it, and I feel for their struggle, right? Because the only person that they got to show it to, they don't have to prove it to, is themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Is to get into a relationship with your goodness, and own it. Because you got nothing to prove.
And there is goodness. There is goodness in everyone. I've not met someone who there isn't.
And by the way, if you weren't trying to prove your goodness, no one would have cared. But now that you're trying to prove your goodness, we're looking.
True.
No one would have even thought of it.
Yep.
If you weren't trying to prove other.
I think thou dost protest too much.
A little bit too much.
For sure.
Yeah. So I think the moral of the story is that I think if we point out the goodness in people, if we a lot of us are conditioned to find the dead rose in the box of roses.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a real opportunity to start looking at some shit that makes you smile. Start connecting to magic. Start challenging yourself.
Yeah.
And then connecting to magic.
Well, and when you name that, you're also naming a neurobiological real-time pattern, which is when we have trauma, we are programmed to look for the problem. And if we are unconsciously programmed at that, we will find them. And that's what it's true. What we put our attention on does grow. And so we actually do have to hijack that and get ourselves back into the flow of the goodness, of the magic, of what's beautiful, of what's working well, which takes a discipline at first.
Right. It's like learning how to hit a golf ball. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, ultimately everything's a choice. Yeah. And you can make a bigger choice than the small choice to go into the old pattern. You can make a bigger choice to do something different. And it's gonna take discipline, and look, just like you were saying earlier, sometimes you're not going to see the result right away, and it's going to take some faith.
Yep.
It's going to take some faith.
Yeah. And for some of us, it takes, because I imagine that prior to this the way that we have our civilization now, where we're all living in these urban centers. And I imagine when we were more nomadic, we were all rather connected to our body. We were rather connected to our spirit. And there is a faith system that's running through our systems. But by now we've gotten so patterned out of our body, disconnected from the planet and in our head's not talking about faith. That's something that's running in our life force. And so many people, you say, well, have faith. And what does that even mean? But for someone like me, there's a language of it that's running in my system. And we all have a possibility of that, but we'd have to remember and sometimes be given the tool of that as a possibility.
Oh, it's just permission to like bring it into the fold. I think it's just become just so far out of the realm of possibility. Also, organized religion has gone a bit awry in a lot of ways, and there's a conversation to be had about people's mistrust in faith because it's behind the gates of organized religion. But you can have it for yourself.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be tied to anything.
Nope. It works well when it's not. It can work well when it is also, but yeah, faith doesn't have to be tied to a dogma at all.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've always thought of religion as street signs that get you to a place that you don't have to worship the signs. You can just go and connect with the place.
Yeah. And hopefully those signs get you to the place that you're connecting with, which is a conversation with something alive inside of you.
Yeah. And I think there's an opportunity for religion to reinvent itself, a little more humble, a little more in the image of where it came from. I think that's something. But in the end, it really comes down to connecting to our goodness, understanding that we all have that lowest mode of human nature in us. We're all savage. We all have it. If put in the right circumstances and the right environment, it's part of who we are. It doesn't make you a bad person. Mm-hmm. It just means there's an opportunity there.
Yeah, and if we weren't going around trying to prove that we aren't savage and just getting with the fact that we are, and then accompanying that savage, and then we can actually use that energy in beautiful ways and in responsible ways and in choiceful ways, then we really got something.
Yeah, it's the lipstick on the pig thing. You can put a suit on the dude, but the dude's still a savage.
A lipstick on which?
A lipstick on a pig.
Oh. Yep.
There's an authenticity there. Just be who you are and surround yourself with people who make you better, who there's an implied invitation, at least. Demand, hopefully.
Implied invitation.
To be better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why we love our community is we're all choosing to dig in and to go, wow, this is happening in me. That's kind of weird, isn't it? A little bit wiggly and a little bit nasty. And we're all like, oh yeah, I've got that one. And we're like, oh, to each other about it. We're cheering one another on as we notice some of the things that have been hiding in the shadow. And it adds up to self-acceptance, which then adds up to love and to connection. Mm-hmm. And so we've been able to surround ourselves with people doing the deep dives, doing the deep work, and cheering one another on. And the tribe we came, our ancestors came from, we've been able to find again, and it's quite transformative.
Yeah, and it does take a village. It does take community, and we live in LA, and it's a very lonely place unless you have community. It's you, your family, a couple of friends for the kids, like at the preschool, and then a couple of friends from work. But like, if you don't have a community of people who are like-minded, who are working towards something together, that the community itself. I always said that, like, marriage. In order for a marriage to be really successful, the marriage itself has to have a purpose. It's not just the two people in the marriage having a purpose, but the marriage itself, it serves the marriage to have a purpose of its own, whether it be the betterment of people, whether it be giving back to community, whatever it is. The marriage itself, if it doesn't, there's a lot of weaponry between partners in marriage that get turned in unless there is a joint mission.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, shared intention. And
Yeah.
I think, speaking to how, we have that shared intention in the community. And then when you bring that into families, into the marriage, and even into the family, we're all here to make each other better.
Mm-hmm.
Here to make an impact. It aligns things. It
Mm-hmm.
helps you not lose the plot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it keeps you honest.
Yeah.
It keeps you honest. You're held accountable to showing up for something.
Yeah, you've got a true north that you might wake up cranky one day, and you still have that true north that's saying, okay, well, what are right actions in this direction? And then there you are.
Well, I wake up cranky every day, so and it takes me a minute to find my north every day.
Is there another way?
Listen, I roll myself into that sauna in the morning, and that's how I wake up. So thank God for that thing.
Well, thank God.
All right, kid. Well, this was amazing.
So good to talk to you.
So good. And we'll do it again soon. And I thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, my pleasure. I love you lots.